Hey there everyone, it's Alex here from VG247.com, and as you can see, this is a little look at Metro Exodus, which is obviously the sequel to Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light. If you don't know this series, little bit of a quick rundown. First of all, I just want to say, doesn't this look gorgeous? But quick rundown, there's been a bit of a nuclear problem in the world, let's say, and the previous games saw you surviving with the other survivors in the underground tunnels that are under Moscow. And this game is taking a little bit of a different approach in that it's set a couple of years after Metro Last Light, and you will begin in a similar sort of area to the previous Metro games, but then, as you can see in that first little clip, things quickly turn and you end up in much more wide open areas. Anyway, what is there to tell you? I mean, so a bit of housekeeping up at the top. First thing, main thing, we didn't capture this footage, so this isn't VG247 footage. The publishers, Deep Silver, and the developers, 4A Games, provided this to us. So that obviously means, you know, keep in mind the devs captured this footage, and, you know, they want the game to look really good, but it does look really good, so can't really argue with that. And yeah, and the second bit of housekeeping is just please excuse me if I sound a little bit blocked up. I'm suffering quite badly with allergies, summer allergies, hay fever sort of thing. Anyway, allergies are not nearly as bad as surviving in a nuclear war, and that's what this game is about. As you can see, there's crafting still, and quite a lot of it. There's more for weapons, but we'll talk about that in a second when it gets shown. And just generally, yeah, I mean, you've still got, the thing that's interesting to me is you still have the sort of claustrophobia of the Metro games as they were when they were all set in the tunnels and stuff. But the thing that's actually more interesting, I think, is that there's now a juxtaposition in that when the world opens up, you end up with a completely different feeling to exploration and combat, and especially when you're sort of taking on humans, and rather than in tunnels, it's in larger scale areas that have upstairs, downstairs, and lines of sight and all that sort of stuff. And that's really, really, really interesting. They say that the world of this game is like larger than the first two games, than 2033 and Last Light combined. But regardless of all that, really, I think the more interesting thing is how that space is deployed rather than how much of it there is, in that they haven't just shoved in more of the same. They've used the additional space that they're using to create a sort of different type of space, or at least that's how it seems to me. Obviously, when you're playing things in preview or looking at things in preview, it's always difficult to know exactly how everything is going to feel in the final product. So the footage you've just seen here obviously has some more claustrophobic tunnel undergroundy stuff with zombies, but that's obviously not the limit of the game, and that's a really interesting thing that I think is worth pointing out. As you can see, perfectly demonstrated in this footage, and there's a really interesting difference in colour palette as well. Like when you're inside underground, it's all sort of orange hues from the fire lamps, because obviously a lot of the electrical lighting no longer works. A lot of oranges, a lot of browns, a lot of ruddy colours, and that lighting is, you know, deeply atmospheric and really, again, like I said, quite claustrophobic. Whereas once you get outside, in the daytime at least, because the game does have a full day-night cycle, but in the daytime, you do end up with this feeling of the sun is bouncing off the snow and everything looks really, really bright and gorgeous. And it provides, and you can see for what feels like miles, in most cases anyway. And it really feels like a completely different sort of game. And yet at the same time, still feels very much like Metro. There's still obviously, I don't know, maybe there's some influence from some other different games here and there, like stealth when you're in a base now, given the more open area of zones, feels a touch more like almost like a Far Cry, where you're able to duck in and out of stealth and use melee takedowns to take people down. So there you go, you can see a little bit of adjusting weapons. So the main thing I want to mention here, just briefly, is that that's a major point of improvement for Metro Exodus, is that the developers at 4A Games have tried to ensure that there's a much deeper level of weapon customization going on. There's more parts to find, there's more stuff to craft in terms of crafting, and there's more choice. And obviously there's a variety of weapons too. So you've got pistols and shotguns. There's one of the melee takedowns, by the way. You've got pistols and shotguns and stuff like that. But you've also got, like, there's a big difference in a pistol and a revolver, obviously. And you can have silent takedowns with a crossbow and all that sort of stuff. You can throw knives, but knives are used for something that you have to craft, out of the materials you find, and you can pick them up obviously off people that you down, as just happened in that footage. But yeah, the point is really, it seems pretty feature packed, and it seems like the developers have really taken a look at what they did in the previous 2 games and have just expanded it out in some really smart ways that really adds to the experience. And I'm really, really a big fan of the difference between indoors and outdoors. Like I say, I mean, this footage here, I think this is about to go outdoors. And you'll see, as soon as you step out, everything feels different. Because there's lines of sight everywhere, which means you're more worried about enemies approaching from different angles. But also, you're able to attack from a distance yourself. And also, of course, in being a post-apocalyptic game, and being one that likes to be a little bit more unforgiving than some others, ammo is a constant consideration. So when you're out in those open areas, you might not want to necessarily waste all your ranged ammo too quickly, because it's more difficult to clear the gap, to close the gap and actually get in close, in order to take them down with other means. Of course, you've got the throwing knives, like I said, but and yeah, another little glimpse here at crafting and weapon customization menus. So what you can do will be different depending on where you are, depending if you're doing it out of the backpack or doing it at a workstation. That's obviously an opportunity to, for instance, craft ammo. So you'll be constantly picking up stuff. And given that the game now has this slightly more open structure, a mix of the classic Metro formula, I would say, and a Sandbox formula, that means there's side missions where you can then go and pick up additional resources that can be used for these sort of upgrades to really make every single weapon your own. In terms of being a sandbox, one thing I want to point out is don't expect Fallout, for instance. It's not that open. The idea is more akin to, at least hearing the developers explain it, I would think of it as being more like the new Deus Ex games, let's say, where you have open zones and you can move around them, and there's a main story path that you might be able to complete fairly quickly, or it might take you a bit longer, and then the side quests and stuff like that. But then also, as the story moves on, you'll be moving to completely new zones, and when you do, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to go back on yourself because of the way the story is progressing. So rather than one huge map where you can go anywhere, you'll have a number of maps that you visit over time that are all perhaps of a medium size, but each individual map is perhaps more open than anything you would have seen in a previous Metro game. And obviously, getting outside Moscow and just getting into the Siberian wilderness, I think, just as I said earlier, completely changes the mood and feel of the game. Obviously, as I said earlier, there's a day-night cycle, so that will play into things like, here we have footage of sneaking into a base, and using night vision and stuff like that, and I feel like there's some great opportunities for really tactical play, or even play where you're trying to avoid combat as much as possible if you really want. So this game was obviously originally scheduled to come out in the autumn of this year, in the fall of this year. And that is now no longer happening. It's now been delayed to the first quarter of 2019. So that'll be before March 2019. So it's still quite soon. Right now, as I'm recording this, we don't know the date. However, I'm recording this a couple of days before E3 kicks off, and then you'll be watching it during the show. So there might be, maybe this will appear at a press conference. This game was announced at Microsoft's press conference last year, so it may be the case that there's a deal with Microsoft. Certainly with how this game looks, feels like it would be a good game for them to do some Xbox One X boasting. This is 4K footage, looks gorgeous. HDR looks insane. I think it's a perfect opportunity for them. But basically what I'm saying is, I don't know the date right now, but by the time you're watching this, it may be available. So feel free to, if you hit VG247.com up, we will know. We will tell you on the website if there's a date. And there's a little bit more on this game on the website as well. I've written up something to go with this video, so feel free to go and check it out. if you want to know a bit more, and we'll be covering all the news out of E3 as it comes. But I mean, basically, the headline here is, I think this game looks really badass. I was a really big fan of both the previous Metro games, and this just feels like a natural, smart evolution of what they were doing in those games. Lots of little touches that really make it shine and really make it feel like a more dynamic experience, where you just have more choices that you can make, and enemies also have more choices they can make against you, and more to explore, more to do, and less samey. Because the problem with the underground stuff, although you did come above ground occasionally in the other Metro games, the problem with the games being mostly underground is there's a uniformity to tunnels, to a Metro system, that obviously impacts what you can do design-wise. Whereas here, now they're able to do a bit more outlandish stuff, and it does feel like the slower, more adult, more methodical Far Cry, in a sense, where Far Cry's crazy and over the top. This feels like a slower, more methodical version of some of the ideas, at least, that are expressed in those games, and I think that's really cool looking. So yeah, that's Metro Exodus. I'm not going to keep yapping. But yeah, stick with us here on VG247. We'll have more Metro. We're going to be at E3 this week, so there'll be videos and write-ups from E3. So give us a like, give us a subscribe. Check the website, VG247.com. Loads to come. We are going to be hideously busy. But yeah, before E3's even begun, I went and saw a game that I thought looked really amazing, which is a good start. And that game is this one, is Metro Exodus. So yeah, really pumped for whenever it comes out early next year. Can't wait to actually play it more extensively. So that's it. Yeah. So until next time, bye.